Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 128. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast, an offshoot of Planet America on the ABC Australia, which you can see on Friday at 8 p.m. on ABC News Channel iView, on Facebook at ABC Planet American, and on YouTube at the ABC In-Depth channel. And from next Wednesday, we're also on at 9:30 on ABC TV as well. Twice a week, Dave. That didn't look very good to the people on video.
Yeah.
So I just gave them a bit of a victory
Twice
sign.
a week, and by the way, fuck you.
It's just a victory sign because we're taking over the airwaves. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can also see this podcast on Facebook and YouTube, where you will see, by the way, there's a blurb there as well. People keep on asking about where the information I talk about is. If you click on the information under the Facebook or YouTube videos, there's a blurb. You can look at all the information. And there's there that you'll see the future host of Planet Britain, Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. Dave Smith. Dave.
Hi, I'm Dr. David Smith. I work at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. However, I do not represent either of those institutions on this podcast. What you are hearing is my views on things, not the institutional views of anybody else.
Do you have any views of gratitude today, Dave?
I am thankful to Elle Hardy,
Yes.
friend and sometimes guest host of the podcast, for sending me a text message which I woke up to one morning saying that Colorado blew a 26-0 lead to Stanford. Now, for those of you not familiar with American football, that's a bad thing. If you're the University of Colorado, they were leading 26-0 at halftime and they ended up losing. And after the game, Coach Prime was questioning his players' love of football. So that's going to be a result that really shakes up the rankings, by which I mean not the college football rankings, which Colorado isn't even in. I mean the really important rankings, Coach Prime's rankings of his own children. Two of whom play for that team.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, one of whom is the quarterback. So, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out when those rankings are next published.
Is he questioning his children's love for the game?
I'm sure, of course he is.
It's okay. Wow. Well, that is, I don't think I can compete with that. But look, I actually have two things I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
Actually. One,
Yes.
which I was going to, this is actually suggested by a viewer. I didn't write down their name, unfortunately. They suggested,
Thank you, anonymous viewer.
they suggested that I should be grateful for the AEC. And I thought that was a great suggestion.
Yes.
We obviously just had a referendum.
Yeah.
You can like or dislike the result, but like the only sniff of dissent about the AEC came from Jacinta Price about things that might be happening in the particular electorates that could be picked up with a video, but she wasn't blaming corruption or anything. She was just saying some people might be taking advantage. I don't know if that's true or not.
I think there was more opportunistic AEC bashing going on in that referendum than you realise, particularly coming from Peter Dutton. There were a lot of suggestions that there were corruptible elements to it.
I would be not at all surprised to know that I had no idea what was happening in the Australian election.
Yeah.
Because I don't live in Australia. Oh, well, I do physically live in Australia. My brain lives in America. So I'll take your word on that. But regardless, even if people have been dickheads about it, the AEC is awesome.
Yes, it is.
And every single time I deal with election issues in America and on a state-by-state partisan basis, I just keep on thinking, how different would America be if they had an AEC?
Yeah, and whenever there's any suggestion of anything like, independently drawing up electoral boundaries, you get the Rand Pauls of the world saying this is the apocalypse. This is the federalization of election laws. How terrible would it be if you federalized laws about elections for federal office? That would just be the worst, the nightmare. That you may as well live in communist China if you're going to do that.
Yeah, for Americans who might be watching this.
Yes.
When you hear Dave say that and you go, yeah, it's true. What I'm talking about, the AEC, is the Australian Electoral Commission.
Yes.
It's an independent, neutral body in Australia.
Yes.
That draws our electorates and conducts our elections. And if anyone does rabble rouse about them, then they've been fuckwits.
Yes.
The AEC
Which
is awesome.
includes the opposition leader
Yes.
of the country.
Because the AEC is awesome. So yes.
Yes, I completely agree.
The other thing I wanted to say I was grateful for was Claudia Golden, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics. So,
right.
so that's only the second greatest prize she won this week, as well as my gratitude. She, for those who don't know about Claudia Golden, I've referred to her many times on the show when I talk about the gender pay gap.
That is undoubtedly what got her over the edge.
Yes. Of my gratitude.
Yeah. Well, that's the Pepper vote in the Swedish Academy.
Totally. They're a long-time Pepper viewers
Yeah.
in the Swedish Academy. Look, she really shed light on not just the pay gap, but on women in the workforce generally in a way that no one else did. Even to this day, there are people who still don't understand the data, like the way it works with the pay gap. They still seem to think that a woman and a man working next to each other in exactly the same job, the woman earns 82% of what the man earns, and that's not what happens. That's a complete and Claudia Golden, what she did, she examined the workforce over several centuries. She noted that firstly, there was just as high a proportion of women working in the late 18th century as there is today.
Yes.
It's like a U-shaped graph.
Yes.
And the gender pay gap back then was less than it was later on. And her big contribution was to note that it's about the way work is organised.
Right, yes.
And that when work is organised in a female unfriendly way,
Yes.
it creates both less participation from women and a gender pay gap.
Yes.
And specifically unfriendly to women with families, which is why there's a much smaller gender pay gap for young women than there is for middle-aged women.
Yes.
Right? It's also why professions that allow flexible hours and fewer demands on your time, like say being a pharmacist, have smaller pay gaps. The women in pharmacy earn 94%.
Right.
What men earn. Now it's not 100% of the difference. There is discrimination. There's other factors.
Yep.
But the biggest slice in a non-screwed up country of the gender pay gap is to do with the way we organise work. And look, it'd be wonderful if men and women dealt with families equally.
Yep.
Like I'm not arguing that it shouldn't be like that. I'm just talking about the way reality is right now.
Yes, yeah.
Like and in particular, it's not about. There's plenty of female full-time workers. It's not about that. It's about who is the on-call parent.
Yes.
It's about who has the ability to just work whatever hours they like.
Yes, yeah.
At any point in time, and that's more often to be the husband than the wife in a family relationship.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, and this is really important for now because what Claudia Golden said back then, this is back 10 years ago, said that the way to address gender pay gaps is with flexible jobs with flexible hours.
Yes.
Not just for women, for everyone.
Yes.
Because if it's just for women, what happens, and she showed this, is that there'll be a wage premium for the people who don't take the jobs with flexible hours.
Yes.
And then the men keep on getting paid more because they're the ones who take those jobs, right? But if all the jobs in the sector are more flexible, then it eradicates a large proportion of the gender pay gap.
Absolutely, yes.
And this is so relevant to now because work from home.
Yes.
Work from home is the perfect example of making flexible hours for everyone.
Yes, yeah,
and so hopefully, if Claudia Golden is right, then we will see the gender pay gap shrink over the next decade or two.
Yes.
But anyway, I want to appreciate her because she's done yeoman service in this area. So,
Look, I'm sure that this tribute speech that you've just given her is going to be much better than whatever some desiccated Swede says about her at the ceremony.
Pathetic. I hate Swedes. I don't really hate Swedes. I'm just playing a role here.
Apart from ABBA.
Oh, I love. You're right. I love Swedes.
Hang on. Have all of your gratitudes been Swedish themed in some way?
I don't think so.
Or am I just thinking of the only two I can remember?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I can't think of a third, Dave.
Okay.
Okay, let's go through some correspondence quickly. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to run out of time easy. Timmy says, "Hi, Dr. Dave. I know this might be a weird take, and I'm in no way trying to ridicule you." That's a good start, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, yep.
But has anyone ever mentioned you sound very similar to comedian Tony Martin? I usually listen to the pod and have always assumed you were Tony Martin.
Well, okay. First of all, that's not ridiculing.
No. He's a hero.
Tony Martin is way better at this stuff than I am. So, no one's ever mentioned that to me before, but I'm far from ridiculed. I feel very flattered. Although Tony Martin has a bit of a New Zealand accent, doesn't he?
A little bit, yeah.
A little trace of a New Zealand accent.
He was from New Zealand originally.
Yes. Yeah. See, I grew up listening to Martin Malloy.
So did I.
Yeah. Which in Sydney was carried on Today FM. So, I'm very flattered by that comparison.
There's a bit of it there, but as you say, the accent's slightly different.
Yeah.
Kelly says, I think saying that hog farmers are a bigger threat to the United States than Osama bin Laden is hardly a controversial opinion amongst the left these days. Pig farming specifically apparently results in massive cesspits of liquid manure that make the communities in the vicinity of the farm practically unlivable. At a time when the national conversation was so focused on Middle Eastern terrorism, I don't think he was wrong to assert that environmental damage was a bigger threat to America than terrorists on the other side of the world, or that factory farming had a much greater negative impact on the daily lives of some ordinary American people than that terrorist does.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought so too, which is why I'm reading it out.
Yeah.
So there you go, RFK. That's one for you. And Lewis.
The thing is, he should have actually said that, right?
Yeah.
He should have said Osama bin Laden never came and took a literal shit all over your community.
Well, to be fair to him, what he said was restricted to one column in a local newspaper that I could never find. So maybe he did say it somewhere and it wasn't noted.
Okay.
And Lewis says, are self-serve checkouts a thing in the USA? He's talking about the shoplifting thing we mentioned.
Yes.
I assume the rate of petty shoplifting increases with their introduction in some ways. Note that not having to pay checkout staff may mean businesses are still coming out ahead even with greater shoplifting. Because I was talking about the shoplifting being only slightly more than it was 3-4 years ago.
Yes, they absolutely are a thing in the US. They became more prevalent in the US before they became a thing here. I remember using them in Michigan. I remember, if you look at the Wikipedia page on the history of self-serve checkouts, I'm going from memory, I think the first one was invented in the 1930s or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. They've always had
abacuses.
I don't know. I don't know how it works, but they've always had problems. Yeah. And, I personally can't use one without having to engage a staff member at some point because something hasn't scanned properly or something scanned twice, or the fucking surveillance camera just decided that I was stealing something.
Oh.
Which I absolutely wasn't.
You weren't doing
I'm not stealing from Coles.
You weren't doing the thing where just everything is a potato?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah. Well,
I've never done that.
These stories do come out about the wily British teen who stole a PlayStation by claiming it was a banana or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I don't like them. Yeah, because first of all, it doesn't actually seem to, it doesn't so much automate everything, but just delay the point at which you have contact with the staff member and turn that into a hostile interaction. Yeah, and second, the surveillance just really creeps me out.
I love them. I love them because I fear humanity and I don't wish to speak to any human beings. So that makes me very, very pleased.
The machines are your friends. But also, people who work at a cash register, they are way better at arranging groceries in bags than I could ever be.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
No, the machines are my people, or non-people, as it were. But yes, I'm sure that's probably part of it. That may well account for the difference in shoplifting, the fact that there's been a spread of self-checkout. It's an interesting thought, at least. And then final correspondence, I asked for haikus about Jeff Marushan.
Oh, yes. Yes. What did they come up with?
Well, some people actually tried haikus.
Oh, good. Okay.
Matthew tried gas stoves in the fray, mansion changes tune today, Jeff's vote slips away.
Nice.
I think that works out the meter.
Yeah.
Christian says rhyming Marushan and let's say Constitution is wrong. It's haiku. I really, really like that. But most people went to limericks, which is fair enough.
Okay, yeah, well.
Neil says, there once was a Marushan. Oh, you should judge, by the way. You judge who the winner is. There once was a Marushan so keen in the Constitution his faith seen. For efficiency untold, he fought to uphold its rights and freedom so pristine. Nice. Christian went for a limerick as well. There once was a young man named Marushan whose job was to cut down pollution, but thence tied to a hob, they denied him his job and taught us to fuck the Constitution. Oliver says, did you see how that man named Marushan fought pollution with our constitution? He once stove so compliant, this poor policy giant now has prospects you'd call Lilliputian.
Wow.
Lilliputian. He gets points for that.
Lilliputian.
That's pretty good.
Look, do we specify it has to be a haiku?
We said haiku, but I'm happy to give it to anyone.
Look, I do think we have to honour the haiku.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, Christian's was good. I like Christian's haiku.
Yes, yeah, I'm going to go with, but...
Because he called me out for being an idiot.
But everybody did extremely well.
Yeah.
Like, I loved all of those.
Yeah, that's very kind. I know you're trying to wrap us up, but I have two more here. So I'll just wrap.
Okay.
Tom had, there once was a pick called Marushan, not confirmed against Constitution. Process not respected. Previous outrage confected. Marushan, a Constitution ablution.
Nice.
I like the people who use the... use the interesting
I'm
words.
very impressed with how many rhymes people are coming up with here. Ablution, Lilliputian. Yeah.
I was impressed with as well.
Yeah.
There were some freeform ones. I'm not going to read them out because they'll go forever. Someone did a takeoff of Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo.
Oh, really?
And offered to donate $500 to charity if we tried it out. But I can't make it scan. I really tried. I wanted to take your money. And I have too much respect for Olivia Rodrigo to ruin her song.
Oh.
So I'll leave that. But thank you very much, Neil, for trying. Okay, so who did you give win to the haiku? To Christian?
Yes.
Well done, Christian. Your prize is that you just won the contest. Okay, let's get into content. Trump legals update. There's so much to talk about. Let's start with Sidney Powell. I have no idea, other than the fact that she pled guilty, what happened.
Yes, so she pled guilty to 6 charges.
Yeah.
They are all misdemeanor charges.
Okay.
Now,
so that means no jail?
That means no jail.
Yep.
6 years of probation, I believe, is the sentence. It's a condition of that she has to truthfully testify in any trials of her co-defendants.
Oh, okay. So she needs to testify.
She needs to, and testify truthfully. And there's been a lot of speculation that could also be of importance to the federal trial that is going on.
And does she need to be drug tested? That's what I want to know. That's all right.
I've got no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I don't know what psychedelics she was on when she came up with this, but for those of you who are wondering exactly what it was that that her involvement was in the Georgia case, she was all mixed up in the Coffee County stuff. I shouldn't say all mixed up in it. That makes her sound innocent. No, she was directing the Coffee County operation, which was sending operatives to Coffee County to illegally access voting machines and was actually physically removing voting machines in some cases, wasn't it? And
I think they just copied all the data.
Yeah, but anyway, copying or illegally accessing all this data, very wrong, very illegal. And, if it had gone to trial, she would have been very unlikely to escape the consequences. So
we did foreshadow this a few weeks back when the bail bondsman who no one had heard of pled guilty but said that he was happy to testify, and he was the one that she spoke to.
Yes.
So he was about to dump her in it.
I think we did say back then that she was the next cab off the rank, which she is. So
who's the next cab off the rank after her then?
Oh, good question.
When she testifies.
Yes. No idea.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Yes.
This is how it works.
Yeah.
I don't like RICO. I've said it a million times, but this is how it works.
Yes, it is.
By making people roll over.
Yeah.
One at a time. There's a domino and then another domino and then another domino.
Until it's just a rolling mass of dominoes.
Yes. Okay, so anything else about Sidney Powell? Or
No.
Okay, I said this happened this morning, so I'm not across it yet. I'll add something here and then I'll get you to talk about the other thing, the gag order.
Yes, yeah.
I want to talk about Trump immunity. He's claiming that he's immune from criminal prosecution.
Yep.
Unless he was previously impeached, which is a bit weird. Let me explain how this works.
He was previously impeached.
Oh, sorry, yeah, convicted.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, that's correct to point that out. It would have been pointed out in the comments if you hadn't.
Yeah.
How is this supposed to work? There's a Supreme Court case, Fitzgerald v. Nixon, which established absolute immunity for civil liability for actions by a president while in office. Okay?
Yep.
Justice Powell wrote at the time, quote, "In view of the special nature of the president's constitutional office and functions, we think it appropriate to recognize absolute presidential immunity from damages liability for acts within damages liability for acts within the outer perimeter of his official responsibility." So presidential conduct that fell outside the outer perimeter of his official responsibility could be civilly actionable. That's why Paula Jones could sue, could pursue a sexual harassment lawsuit against Bill Clinton because sexual harassment wasn't part of his official duties, although you'd be forgiving for thinking that it was sometimes the way he carried on.
Yes.
But let's leave that aside.
Yeah.
Now, you might be wondering what that has to do with criminal cases, which is the ones that we're talking about at the moment. That's a great question.
Yes.
I would love John Lauro to explain that because so far he hasn't explained it. He has just pointed out that this is an area of the law which has not been adjudicated and he'd like to adjudicate it. Now, you might go, well, that's not going to work. I mean, there's like precedent certainly doesn't point in his direction. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Because Nixon couldn't use executive privilege to shield himself from a criminal grand jury subpoena for his presidential tapes. In fact, Trump v. Vance, the tax records thing, that was a similar kind of situation where the court held that he had no absolute right to block the release of his financial records in a criminal investigation.
Yes.
So why would this be any different as a criminal investigation? The answer is I don't think they care. All they want to do, I think, is get a ruling and then appeal it to the appeals court and then appeal it to the Supreme Court. Because that wastes time. And if they can possibly put the trial off to, say, July, August, then they can start going, hang on. Political persecution. This is electoral interference. The Biden machine is so corrupt. You need to put this case till after the election. I think that's what this is about. I don't think there's any chance that they're actually going to create a new form of immunity, but I do think they could chew up some time. And so that's all I really have to say about that.
And I mean, John Lauro, as much as he's a media grandstander and often acts like a political operative, he is actually a real lawyer.
He's an actual lawyer.
Which you can't say for a lot of Trump's legal team. So it's no surprise that Trump is putting himself in John Lauro's big, meaty hands. And
Dave literally texted me during the week to say, I want to talk about John Lauro's big meaty hands. So I'm keen to see what else you have to say about them other than the fact that
that's it. That's it. And I just say Trump wants to be in them when it comes to progressing his case.
Are they big and meaty hands just compared to Trump's little hands?
Well, this is the thing. Now that I think about it, I was looking at a photo of them all in court together and their hands were all resting on the table. So maybe I am overstating the size of John Lauro's hands.
Okay. While you're running hot and I cough, why don't you talk about the gag order?
Okay, so this is a limited gag order. It's been referred to as a narrow gag order that Tanya Chutkan who is the judge in the DC case, has imposed on Trump that says he cannot make statements that target prosecutor Jack Smith or his staff.
Or his family.
Or the court staff or their families or any witnesses or potential jurors. Now, he's actually allowed to say this is politically motivated. He's allowed to rail all he likes about the political motivations. He is not allowed to target these people. Which, he has already been targeting members of the court and And
he is allowed to target the judge.
He is allowed to target the judge.
She said that's cool. He can target Washington, D.C. if he wants to. He can target the Department of Justice. He can target Biden and the Biden administration. But just not witnesses and prosecutors and court staff.
Do you think this is going to work?
Well,
I mean, the way they designed it was clearly to give him maximum leeway to do all the stuff that he's going to do anyway without being able to say that he's being persecuted for it.
Which he immediately said anyway.
So, who knows whether there's ever any way to deal with this. There was one law professor who said that this is a win-win situation for Trump because he's going to violate the gag order anyway, but still gets to claim that he's being, politically targeted.
I think that's true, but I don't know what other options
are. No, this is
the
same law professor said, but it's still a good gag order. It's well designed and it's necessary for the rule of law. Like you can't just say, okay, it's acceptable that he targets court staff or witnesses.
Look, there isn't a lot of precedent to measure this up against because most defendants aren't self-destroying. Like usually they want to win their case, so they don't try and antagonize everyone.
Yep.
And usually they don't have the resources that Trump has behind them, and usually they're not running for president.
No.
So this hasn't really been tested before. So we don't really, like, this is like, as John Lauro likes, this is untested ground.
Yes, yeah.
There was an injunction, gag order against Harold Ford Sr. a few years back.
Yes, yeah.
When he was done for corruption. But that gag order, and that was overturned, but that gag order was way broader than this one.
Yes, yeah.
And people have noted that Chutkan's language seems to reflect what the court said Harold Ford Sr.'s gag order should have been.
Right.
So she's done some good law, it seems.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so that's the father of my favourite Fox News commentator
Yes.
who works out to rich men north of Richmond.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I should read you the quote from Trump's spokesperson.
Yes, yeah.
Today's decision is an absolute abomination and another partisan knife stuck in the heart of our democracy by crooked Joe Biden, who was granted the right to muzzle his political opponent, the leading candidate for the presidency in 2024, and the most popular political leader in America, President Donald J. Trump. President Trump will continue to fight for our Constitution, the American people's right to support him, and to keep our country free of the chains of weaponized and targeted law enforcement. Now, note, that was from his spokesperson. If he'd said that, that wouldn't have violated the gag order.
Ah.
Like, that's fine under the gag order. That doesn't criticize staff.
No.
That criticizes the order from the judge.
Yes.
That's fine. It criticizes Biden.
Yes.
It criticizes the Department of Justice.
Yes.
That's all fine. So I think that in itself is an illustration.
Yes, yeah.
That it's not really impinging on his speech at all.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
I thought the judge also, I mean, this is common sense, but she made a fair point. I'll just read it. First Amendment protections yield to the administration of justice and to the protection of witnesses. His presidential candidacy does not give him carte blanche to vilify public servants who are simply doing their job.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to take a step further. How is that part of your campaign anyway? Like, it's one thing to say, I get he's campaigning against the Biden administration's, against the Department of Justice's legal processes. I get that. But how is he campaigning against some staffer in the court?
Oh no, that's been a part of his campaign tactics for a long time.
No, I know he does this.
Yeah.
But I don't see how that is the most effective. Like, that's not like when he does that, he's just been a bully and an asshole. It's not effective.
That's his campaign.
Yeah, I am a bully and an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, he has lots of followers who have a lot of time on their hands. Right. That is the activation signal for them.
Yeah. Well, see, the problem is, as I've discussed before,
Yeah.
I actually think we've got the arrow of causation the wrong way around. Right. I think Trump these days follows his followers rather than
yeah.
He amplifies them.
Yes.
So for instance, the number of times I've seen the Federalist run some really dubious piece, and then the day after I see Trump escalating their piece. And the fact is, they love going after the stuff.
Yes.
So they'll keep on doing it.
Yeah.
And it'll be viral and it'll keep on going. He doesn't need to do it. I mean, he probably still will do it anyway, and just to show that he can.
Yeah.
It's like a dominance ritual, I guess. But also, I'll just give you another example. They were citing, like, Jack Smith's team was citing intimidating communications sent to one of their prosecutors after being singled out by Trump. They mentioned that a Texas woman was charged in August for making death threats against Chutkan.
Yes.
In a phone message, she said, if Trump doesn't get elected in 2024, we're coming to kill you. So tread lightly, she said on a phone message for Chutkan, right? This was the day after Trump wrote, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. That's allowed under his gag order as well.
Yeah.
All of these things are allowed under his gag order.
Yes, yeah.
Like, the only thing which I've seen recently which would not be allowed under his gag order is a thing he did to Engeren's staffer, saying that she was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend.
Yes, yeah.
It's just, like, he's got a lot of rope here.
Yes,
he really does. But I think it's sensible because
Yes.
I think she's done the best in a terrible situation.
Yes, yeah.
You have any other thoughts about this?
Not about the gag order specifically, but there are some more legal things.
Okay, yeah, you keep on going with more legal stuff
that we need to talk about.
Please.
So, I think it was the New York Times was reporting that there is evidence. So this is in the Chesbro
Yep. Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another
one of your text messages.
Yes. So in the Chesbro hearings, one of the things that they're talking about is that Chesbro said when this was to do with submitting. This is part of the Georgia case, but part of it was Chesbro submitting it was a submission to Wisconsin.
Yep.
Yes. Some last minute claim, which Chesbro said had a 1% chance of succeeding, which was overstating it significantly. But he said, when he said to the skeptics in Trump's circle, but there's a legal dimension, but there's also a political dimension that you need to consider as well. And the prosecution is saying that is evidence that this was a political conspiracy. Now, there's two things worth noting. First of all, this is part of the slow but very, very clear erosion of the defense that Trump was just following legal advice.
Yeah.
Trump himself no longer seems to be running that line.
1% is a good call.
Yes.
As far as erosion.
Yeah. But second thing that we need to talk about is the lawyers of the lawyers.
Yeah.
Chesbro's lawyer is called Scott R. Grubman.
Grubman.
Yeah. Grubman, the superhero America has been waiting for.
Cheesebro's lawyer is Grubman.
Yes. And as I was strolling through the New York Times, I also saw this headline. Influx of fake lawyers rattles Kenya. The authorities are investigating numerous cases of unqualified people acting as lawyers. So this apparently is not just a problem confined to Trump's legal team.
Is it possible that ever since the election is over, all of Trump's legal people have to go find somewhere to work? And so they've en masse migrated to Kenya. It's possible.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. Okay. Do you have any other legal stuff?
No.
Okay. I got a quick primaries update. The money came out. I just read out the totals. Joe Biden, third quarter total, he raised $71 million. Cash on hand, $91 million. That's a lot. Donald Trump's third quarter total was $45 million. Cash on hand, $37 million, of which $36 million is for the primary, which doesn't leave much for legal fees. Okay, so that's obviously an advantage for Biden, although Trump can obviously raise money on tap.
Yep.
But he'll be using a lot of that money for legal fees. He's starting from, pretty much zero if you look at those numbers we just said.
Yes.
So money, I wouldn't say it will necessarily be an issue next year, but it could potentially be an issue.
Could be.
Ron DeSantis, third quarter total $15 million, cash on hand $12 million with $1 million in debt. $5 million is designated for use in the primary, sure. Nikki Haley, third quarter total, $11 million, cash on hand, $11.6 million, of which $9 million is for the primary. So she's starting to catch up with Ron DeSantis and the fundraising there. Vivek Ramaswamy, third quarter total, $7 million, cash on hand, $4 million, $1 million this quarter came from him. Tim Scott, third quarter total, $4 million, cash on hand, $13.3 million. He used to have this huge war chest, which is kind of eroding now, and he's not raising much. So he might not be long for this
Especially now that George Will is telling him, get yourself and my wife out of this race.
He's going to be spending all on George Will's wife while he's still in the race. Chris Christie, third quarter total, $3.8 million, cash on hand, $3.9 million. Well, he's just...
It's about $3.8 million more than I was expecting.
Yeah, he's just bouncing around on the gravel for now and trying to stay in as many debates as he possibly can before he drops out. Mike Pence, third quarter total, $3.4 million, cash on hand, $1.2 million, $620,000 in debt. That is your takeaway right there. It's time for Mike Pence to talk to Mother, have a good long chat to Mother and evaluate his options, I feel.
Yeah, the dream might be over.
Yeah. I got one more stat for you here. Remember, Mike Pence's total, third quarter total, $3.4 million. Cash on hand, $1.2 million.
Yep.
Doug Burgum.
Oh, I was going to ask about Doug.
Third quarter total, $3.4 million. Same as Mike Pence. Cash on hand, $2.3 million more than Mike Pence. But wait, to be fair, he gave himself $2 million.
Yeah.
So there is that. But still, Pence is in the Burgum zone. When you're in the Burgum zone, that's not a good place to be. So, anyway. So my takeaways from that, apart from Pence needs to get out of there And Tim Scott is starting to drop out.
You just call him Tim Squat.
Tim Squat has Jack Squat coming his way. Haley is getting closer to DeSantis, and Ramaswamy, that was his quarter.
Yeah.
He didn't take launch. That was his best shot.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Rama. Anything to say about money?
No.
Wisconsin update. Looks like it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Friday, Protasewicz said she would not step aside from the Wisconsin gerrymandering case. Mm-hmm. She said she had expressed her views on gerrymandering, but had not specified how she'd rule on that particular case, and so she would be hearing it. Thank you very much. House Speaker Voss said he would not be seeking to remove her quite yet.
There you go.
That may be because he's very reasonable. Mm-hmm. That may be because one of the Conservatives said that they opposed impeaching Protasewicz, so he didn't have the numbers.
Remember, they're on exactly 2/3 in the Senate. So they could not afford to lose one.
Yeah.
And they did keep mum for a very, very long time on that. But all it takes is one.
Yep. And that one came through. And although Speaker Voss does say if they decide to inject their own political bias inside the process and not follow the law, we have the ability to go to the Supreme Court, and we also have the ability to hold her accountable to the voters of Wisconsin, he says. And also he had an advisor who, former Justice David Prosser, who supposedly advised him on this, whose advice was leaked, that said that there should be no effort to impeach Protasewicz on anything we know.
There you go.
So anyway, there's that. Just so you know, just put that to bed, tie that in a little bow. Done. Menendez update.
Oh, yes.
Updates.
Yes.
Only one Senate Democrat so far has called for him to be expelled because he ain't going anywhere of his own accord. That was the first person who said he should resign. Do you remember who that was?
Oh, no, it wasn't Cory Booker.
Nope.
Cory Booker was later to get on the train. No, I can't remember.
It was Fetterman.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And there's a funny piece in the Hill. I want to read it to you word for word because I found this very amusing. It was about when they passed each other as they rode the escalator in opposite directions to the Capitol from the Senate subway area. Fetterman told Menendez that Tuesday would be a great day to resign. Menendez told Fetterman that he is hanging on to this issue too closely. Fetterman mockingly responded that he is consumed by Menendez's indictment. I can totally see Fetterman.
Fetterman is really into this kind of mockery, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm consumed.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a funny little exchange. I reckon Menendez should have sung at him.
Never be enough for me.
Yeah.
Little stab there. I the police have made me promise to not play more than 3 seconds of that performance anymore. But Fetterman is, I got to admit, he's starting to grow on me.
Yeah,
The cheeky little
me
Fetterman.
too. Like,
he's starting to grow on me, and also
I think I've always been a bit better disposed to him than you have.
Yeah, you have. And the reason he started growing on me, I think, is because he's consistent.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it, and sometimes he's consistently shallow, but still he's consistent.
Yes, that's right.
I must admit, I had concerns about his lack of transparency about his recovery during his election campaign. Like that really bothered me. Mm-hmm. It bothered me a huge amount. But not only is he growing on me, but he's recovering.
He is.
And that didn't have to happen, but it is happening. Yeah. He's recovering well.
He actually is. You do have to have recovered quite a lot of function to be engaged in this level of constant mockery of not just your opponent's party, but members of your own party.
Yeah. But if you watch, I'm not going to put any plain clips. I might put a link in if I remember. If you watch him on Colbert the other day, he was on Colbert the other day. He was very fluent.
Okay.
He still had the iPad to help him process the questions.
Yeah.
But he was answering fast and very fluently, and there wasn't any stumbling at all, really. Good on him. Supreme Court update. Justice Amy Coney Barrett said on Monday she favours an ethics code for the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Quote, it would be a good idea for us to do it, particularly so that we can communicate to the public exactly what it is that we're doing in a clearer way. Because they're doing great stuff.
This was a speech that she gave at the University of Minnesota in front of 2,600 people, briefly interrupted by protesters.
Yes.
But yes, that was a very interesting moment.
Yeah. Look, I continue to to await events when it comes to Barrett and Kavanaugh. But
Yeah.
like, they're not the end of the world so far.
No.
They're not.
And she also talked about her experiences being on the Supreme Court while raising children. And my favourite part of it was that one day her 11-year-old son requested to listen to Who Let the Dogs Out at the bus stop. And she said she's walking through the corridors of the Supreme Court through these galleries of framed paintings of Supreme Court luminaries, like singing to herself, Who Let the Dogs Out?
Wow. I want to know. I just said something positive about her, but I want to question her parenting. Like the fact that she's an 11-year-old who's aware of Who Let the Dogs Out. What is she exposing that 11-year-old to? Because there's no way that an 11-year-old would come across Who Let the Dogs Out in their general internet traffic.
No, but this is the
it's
weird.
A very old song.
This is the weird thing about I don't know, music from 20 years ago seems to have a longer half-life than ever.
Yeah.
And
of all the songs.
some people have argued that it doesn't actually sound that, or not Who Let the Dogs Out in general, but in general, music from the 2000s doesn't sound very different from music from
it doesn't.
now.
That's
like if you were to compare music from the 80s with music from
Yeah.
the 60s or
Yeah.
music from the 90s with
Yeah.
music from the 70s, because it sounds so similar, that actually all this stuff has a really long, really long half-life.
Okay, now look, that makes sense, but I'm going to want to have some kind of investigation into whether her child also, 11-year-old.
Also, have you been to a live sport event at any point?
That's fair enough. That's
in the last 20 years?
That's true. They do play American sports events. Yeah.
Well, Australian ones as well. Now that
Dude, I'm a dogs member. I've never heard Who Let the Dogs Out played at a Bulldogs match. I'm telling you, they don't.
Maybe they're sick of it. Maybe they actually got sick of it 20 years ago. But yeah, now that every event is relentlessly DJ'd, I've heard Who Let the Dogs Out at many NRL games.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. No, okay, right. Okay, well, I was just going to say, I want an investigation into whether her child's familiar with Blue Dubba D by Apple 65. and then I might suspend my judgment of her until I hear the answer to that
Yeah,
question.
by the way, we're sorry for inflicting all of these memories on you.
Let's talk about there's two big stories every week at the moment.
Hang on. There's one more thing to say about Menendez.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
People are beginning to wonder whether Nadine, his wife, perhaps got off a little bit lightly for running over and killing a pedestrian in 2018. Just putting it out
What
there.
happened? Well,
No, I'm not going to take it any further than that. But now it's one of those things that no one really thought about until Bob Menendez got into a lot have got involved.
she's spent the rest of her life with Bob Menendez.
Yeah.
How much punishment does she
That's
require?
right, yes.
I think
Yeah, she was actually sentenced to be sung at in front of the Taj Mahal.
Anyway, the two stories that just seem to be part of our our purgatory,
Yep.
is the Speaker and Israel. So
Yes.
let's start with the Speaker.
Okay.
You might as well begin.
Yes. So I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning and opened up the Washington Post website, and I saw for the first time that Israel Gaza had actually been knocked off the top of their website, right? So, and what was up there was Jordan not to pursue third vote, will back expansion of Speaker pro tempore's powers. I'm sure that the headline was actually a lot more concise than that, but that was what the gist of it
Catchy
was.
headline.
So that was this morning, 5 o'clock Australian Daylight Standard Time.
Yeah.
It was Eastern Time. At that point, Jordan said he was not going to seek a third vote. Instead, he was going to back this plan that was actually originally devised by a couple of Republican moderates, which would expand the Speaker pro tempore's power until January 3rd. So it was a temporary expansion of the powers of the temporary Speaker. And knowing that this plan would need Democratic support, one of the provisions of it actually was, because if we're going to have a temporary Speaker, that it would actually require a significant number of Democratic votes to schedule floor votes.
Why does it need the Democrat support? They have a majority. Are there Republicans who oppose this?
Yeah, because of course course there are Republicans who oppose.
Of course there are.
There
Sorry,
are
what am I
so
saying?
many Republicans who oppose. They're saying, we're not going into coalition government with the Democrats.
But it's not. It's barely coalition. It's McHenry who's the speaker.
Yeah. No, but the idea is that any deal that would attract Democratic votes, that would be tantamount to coalition government. With
Once again, I know that you're not.
Yes.
This is not your idea.
Yeah.
But once again, just to be clear,
Yeah.
the reason they need Democratic votes,
Yes.
the coalition you're describing
Yeah,
is
yeah.
because these bloody idiots won't vote for it.
They can't get their shit together.
Yes.
Anyway,
So
Jordan was actually backing this plan.
Yeah.
For a few hours. This
and there were still people opposing it.
coalition agreement. There were so many. No, Jordan could not convince a lot of his own supporters that this was a good idea. Now, obviously, what Jordan was trying to do here was to buy time to convince 20, now up to 22 members of the Republican conference that they should vote for him.
Yeah.
And I imagine this kind of convincing would have involved the same tactics he would have used as an Ohio State wrestling coach in the sauna to try to convince wrestlers to be his friend, with exactly the same outcomes.
That's how he became the king of the sauna.
That's right. So, this was doomed to fail. So many people were against it. Like Jordan's own supporters were against it. Jordan's opponents were against it because
what do they want? What do they want? The people who are opposed to it, what do they want?
Well, it depends whether they're Jordan's supporters or opponents. If they're Jordan's opponents, they don't want any possibility of Jim Jordan becoming the speaker.
Eventually.
If they're Jordan's supporters, they just want to make Jordan the speaker now without having to do any kind of deal with, with Democrats.
Which they wouldn't if they voted.
Yeah. Now, actually, it's been last time we were speaking about this. This is before Jordan had actually had a vote. So,
that's right, yes.
Yeah. So the first vote, even though there was a lot of reporting saying that, okay, so when there was this second vote after the nomination of Jordan, 50 Republicans or 55 Republicans said that they wouldn't vote for Jordan on the floor. There's all this reporting saying Jordan and his people are really working all of these dissenters over.
Yeah.
Not only was there a lot of undoubtedly unpleasant interpersonal contact between Jordan and these supporters, also Hannity was going after them. You know, Hannity was urging all of his viewers to call up these members of Congress and to ask them, when are you planning to open the House so that we can support Israel? There was that kind of pressure campaign. And the day before the vote, I was seeing reporting with Jordan's allies confidently saying they had the number of dissidents down to 10.
Yep.
Yeah, no, turned out.
Yeah, people assuming
yes.
that Jordan was going to, and they said it might not be the first vote.
Yeah.
But we'll just keep on going.
Yeah.
We'll just do a vote after vote after vote.
Yeah.
And
first vote, 20 Republicans vote against him. Yeah. And it was very clear that these are not people who are going to change their minds. That this included a lot of Republicans from New York who believe it would be impossible for them to get reelected with Speaker Jim Jordan.
I love that they at that point in time they didn't even bother to try a second vote. Then after saying we're just going to keep on going.
Yes,
they literally they just sat on the floor for ages.
Yes,
and then just said, let's not do it.
Yeah,
and I actually loved Jake Tapper's response, which is when they came back after deciding to not do a second vote, which they promised to do all day.
All right, well, I guess they're not going to call a second vote. Good times.
Good times.
Yeah, so now there was a second vote eventually. After
2
some
days
more
later.
highly effective lobbying, and the number of Republicans who didn't vote for him went from 20 to 22.
Yes.
He did actually win 2 Republicans over, but he lost another 4. Now, that seems to indicate downward spiral, right? There's absolutely no reason to believe he's going to gain more votes on the third round. In fact, some people are reporting that the tactics of the 55 who declared that they wouldn't vote against him were to actually limit the number of votes against him to 20 in the first round and then increase it in subsequent rounds.
That seems like way too much coordination for the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, these are the moderate Republicans, right? These are the ones who openly wish that they had the discipline of Democrats. Yeah. So, look, I don't know where this is going because Jordan is very much in the Trump school of politics, which is basically if you just hold on for long enough, right? If you signal that you've got a far higher tolerance for chaos and inflicting pain on the party and on the House of Representatives and on the country than anyone else, then you'll eventually win because everyone else will give way. But the problem is, I think Republicans have now seen so much of this and they have endured so many affronts to their personal dignity so many times when they had to take that humiliating exit route because of the Trumps and Matt Gaetzes and Jim Jordans of the world. I think that some of them have just decided they've had enough. They need to keep their dignity intact, and they realise that there's a critical mass of them who can keep Jim Jordan out of this position.
Yeah, I just want to pick up from there because you actually get into an area which I'm just about to talk about, which is that I want to I've got a theory about why this is happening.
Yes,
I think there are two different things happening at once. They combine for this situation.
Yes, yeah.
And you have just described quite well the first one.
Yes.
Which is that Republicans have now essentially dispensed with democracy.
Yes.
Like the principle of democracy, we've seen this came for a while. The principle of democracy is you all get together and you take a vote, and whoever gets the most votes, everyone goes along with the verdict.
Yes.
You all agree, wherever the verdict is of the majority, you all go with it. That's the principle of democracy, right?
Yeah.
And people used to accept the Democratic verdict. They might whinge about it, but they took it as the ultimate referee, right? But after a few years now of not accepting Democratic verdicts, it's become synonymous with, in inverted commas, fighting.
Yes.
You fight by not accepting the result and just going on. A real fighter just keeps on going regardless. You look for loopholes.
Yeah.
If you gracefully accept the verdict of the majority, that's weak.
Yes.
So when Matt Gaetz says, I don't care what 200 of my fellow Republicans think, I'm going to fight until I get rid of him, and I'm going to white ant him until I get rid of him, that's seen as strong and pure and noble. He's a fighter.
Yes.
Right? And now they've imported that same logic to caucus votes as well, right? And that obviously makes the whole system break down because the Democrats will vote against all of your candidates in lockstep.
Yeah.
Right? So it becomes impossible to have a majority if there's any resistance at all. Okay. Now that is step one. That's what we described. And by the way, ironically, Scalise, by not doing that, not only proved himself weak in the eyes of his, caucus and unsuitable for the speakership, but also actually proved himself a worthy contender in reality. Because you want a speaker to be based in reality and not this fighting bullshit. Right. So he proved that he should be the speaker. Potentially. At least a potential candidate. But he disqualified himself in their eyes. By accepting the verdict. Of his own caucus. Right. Anyway, but that's step one. Step two is the structural reason, which is that the GOP is now clearly two parties. There's your traditional party and then there's your Trumpist party, right? And the way the system works, they're forced to stay in the same party because there's no room for a third party in American politics. A third party is death, essentially. So note, by the way, no labels. If you're watching, I know you are because everyone watches, everyone's a pepper. If there was a third party, it wouldn't be you. It'd be these guys. It'd be the Trumpists. It'd be the Jordan party. Or the old Republican party. One of the two. It wouldn't be no labels. But anyway, this means, though, that whoever is more willing to break the party up is going to win. Because the rational person knows that if they don't stick together, they're going to lose. Until now, that was the Trumpists who are more willing to break the party up. But as you just described, traditional conservatives have had enough. They're seeing the play now. Finally. And they're now prepared to be just as stubborn. And so because of step one, any resistance breaks the process down. Because of step two, there will always be resistance. Which means the system is always going to break down in this current configuration. So what happens now? I don't know. I agree with you because they've created a situation now where there is no way forward.
And I mean, one of the things that the last week has really revealed is just the extent to which Jordan is loathed by so many Republicans. Like, because, Jordan's whole pitch to them was, well, you've got to cave in because the Trumpist base is behind me. I am what the Trumpist base wants.
America wants me.
Yeah,
was
yeah.
The quote.
Yes. America wants me. Now, first of all, I think that they might have realized that, the general rules of political gravity apply, and actually not that many people even know who Jim Jordan is. Like, yes, the obsessives know. Yes, the people who are watching their 9 hours of Fox News a day certainly know who he is. But that's not everyone. That is not even the whole Trumpist base. And a lot of the Trumpist base ultimately only really cares about Trump. They don't actually give a shit about Jim Jordan. So the idea that we're going to terrify all of these congressmen in New York by whipping up the Trump base for Jim Jordan, it was just never going to carry that much weight. Second, I already knew that Kevin McCarthy had called Jordan a political terrorist.
So John Boehner.
John Boehner called him a
legislative terrorist.
A legislative terrorist.
Yeah.
But I was not aware of this fact that the conservatives were dragging out en masse, which is that he has never actually sponsored a successful piece of legislation in his entire career. Like
since 2006.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that his legislative record was thinner than his hair. Sorry, that was a cheap crack, but a warranted one. Yeah. But I didn't realize it was
more tenuous than his shirt button about to pop.
Yeah, I didn't quite realize it was that thin. And what an extreme manifestation he is of this trend of legislators who just aren't interested in legislation at all. Like, obviously, I knew that was Matt Gaetz, but I didn't quite realize that Jim Jordan was so thoroughly in that camp as well.
I actually have more stats on this.
Yes, throw them out.
Yeah, according to the Center for Effective Lawmaking, which measures not just bills that you pass, but the bills that get some kind of traction.
Yes.
And the ones that you push that could make some kind of impact.
Yes.
Jordan's been one of the 5 least effective Republicans over the past 4 Congresses. As far as bipartisan index ratings go, which track co-sponsorships across the aisle, either by you or for your bills, he's ranked 428 out of 435.
Wow.
Now, that's most of what a speaker does.
Yes.
Yeah, passing bills and doing deals with the other side.
Yeah.
I can't think of one of his policies. He just doesn't do policy.
No.
He just does culture war.
Yeah.
That's it. And vilifying people. He's good at that.
Yeah. And his supporters have pointed out to bills that he supported that never, ever would have had a chance of becoming law at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
not sponsored, but, said he was in favour of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, he's just like, and I think this is actually a factor as well. He's just a terrible person.
Yeah, he is.
Like he's like, for instance, after the vote, Jordan had a closed door meeting with Scalise.
Yeah.
And then immediately leaked that Scalise wouldn't commit to helping him get the votes he needed.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is just, he's clearly trying to make Scalise a scapegoat for his failure, which is just pathetic. And as you say, the bully boy stuff.
Yeah.
This is one of his supporters who leaked the quote, "America wants me."
Yes.
That he said that to Scalise apparently.
Yeah.
Like he told, this is Ann Wagner, who's been voting for him.
Yes.
For Jordan. She said that she heard that Jordan said to Scalise, "You get one ballot, and when you go down, you will nominate me." And then Scalise pushed back, saying he'd won the conference rules fair and square. And then Jordan said, "America wants me," and stormed out the door. That is literally when the supporters said that.
What's amazing is just how much of a mystique he's somehow created for himself. Like, I mean, obviously he's popular in his district. But like Matt Gaetz is popular in his district as well.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily say very much.
The Trump base like him.
Yeah.
They do. Also, he clearly promised everything to everyone because he made a point of saying no more Ukraine votes, and yet 4 Republicans insist that he explicitly promised them that he'd be linking Israel funding to Ukraine funding.
Yeah.
And then his spokesperson totally denied it. Like, he's just clearly totally untrustworthy. He's a bully. He says he's going to do something and does something else entirely.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that Scalise honoured was the idea of if you can't get 217 votes, you don't take a floor vote.
Yeah.
And Jim Jordan, he was the one who was pushing that.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get 217 votes.
Yes.
So he went for a floor vote anyway.
Yes.
Like, if you're a moderate, you must be thinking to yourself, this is what it would be like if he was Speaker.
Yeah. And
This would be happening all the time.
And also, I mean, he's chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and lots of Republicans are, not just moderates either, are distinctly unenthusiastic about the Biden impeachment investigation, which they correctly see as an opportunity for Jim Jordan to grandstand, but which the longer it goes on actually seems to damage Jordan's claims more and more.
Well,
Like, it actually seems to make it less likely that anyone's going to believe that Biden should be impeached.
but I'm glad you brought that up because I was about to say, if you're a moderate, I actually think their plan is really smart. I'm surprised. I did not
Yes.
expect them to be doing this.
Okay.
Because they usually fold.
Yeah.
I was surprised they finally stiffened up, but they're right to. This is the time to do it because
Yes.
from here on in, it only gets worse for them.
Yeah.
If he becomes a speaker,
Yes.
then you know there's just going to be a vote after a vote after a vote that they don't want to take.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's going to do the same tactics to them again. He'll bully them.
Yeah.
He'll harass them. He'll be a dickhead. You know the way the Trump crowd works. Every litmus test is the only one that matters.
Yes.
So it'll be the impeachment next. It will be like if he becomes the speaker, then you know in a month's time you're voting on the impeachment.
Yes.
And if you don't vote yes, then you'll get scorched earth from your own leader.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you support everyone. And then after that, there'll be another one. And then there'll be
Yes.
another one. And he's going to make his moderates entirely unelectable.
Yes, yeah.
And if they say no to anything, he will have them destroyed.
Yes.
And so right now it's hard to stand up to
Yeah.
him, but it'll be harder after this.
Right.
So now is the best time for them to stand firm.
Yes, yeah.
So I think they've been pretty smart.
I think so. And on that note, I need to go on a tangent.
A tangent treehouse?
Yes. Tangent treehouse.
Yes,
Okay.
okay,
It's
yes.
not going to be clear where I'm going
I can't wait to
initially,
find out.
but I will get there in the end. I have read Stephen King's novel It 3 times.
Okay.
It is by Stephen King's own...
It involves a clown.
Yeah,
I think I know where it's going.
by Stephen King's own admission, the structure of it is quite a mess.
Okay.
Right? He says it's a very poorly structured novel. I still just love it. It draws me in every time. Part of the problem with it is it's just such a big, long, complicated adventure with so many backstories and so many characters that even when you're reading it for the first time, you're like, you know how this is going to end, but you're like, how is he actually going to end this? Like, how is he going to build this monster up into something so big and so terrifying? Any way of defeating it is just going to end up being disappointing, right? Any final confrontation with the monster is just going to end up being disappointing. Okay. And in the book, it is a bit disappointing, but it's also it's complicated and very weird to describe narratively, and it involves this Mayan ritual or something that involves biting somebody's tongue and laughing at the same time, and then there's something to do with a turtle flying through space. I've read this 3 times, and even I'm hazy on the details.
You're not selling it, man.
Hazy on the details of it, and like the clown turns into a giant spider or something. Anyway, So it was hard enough for the book to actually end it in a non-disappointing way. Yeah. The movies were never, ever going to have a chance of doing this, right?
So it sounds like they need David Lynch.
They were so this was made into a 2-part movie.
Yeah.
It Part 1 was not bad. It Part 2 should have been called shit. It was not very good. But anyway, so the kids who are now grown up. So sorry, I'm ruining the ending, but it deserves to be ruined because it's bad. The kids who are now grown ups are in the sewer, finally confronting this monster that is this clown who's turned into a giant spider. But it's like they suddenly realize, if we just realize that it's just a clown, then we can defeat it. It's really, really lame. And as soon as they start to realize you're just a clown, they start yelling at it you're just a fucking clown! You're just a fucking clown! Then it starts shrinking down to nothing. And then they start beating him up saying, you're just a fucking clown! You're just a fucking clown! And then he just shrinks down. Very disappointing ending to a movie, but I think this is basically what we are now seeing. in the House of Representatives. All these Republicans screaming at Jim Jordan, "You're just a fucking clown. You're just a fucking clown."
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, Dave.
That's a tangent treehouse.
That was not a tangent treehouse. It became very relevant. You just took your time to get there. But that explains it all.
Yeah.
I think I was worth the journey.
Okay.
It was very scenic. Okay. Before we leave this topic area, there's a couple things I want to talk about. First of all, can we talk about Nancy Mace for a second?
Oh yes.
Because what is going on there? Like she began the week walking around with a scarlet letter A on her shirt, right? And I wasn't sure if she was auditioning for Alvin and the Chipmunks. It was. I don't know what was going on. I never read the Scarlet Letter. Okay. I did watch the Emma Stone movie Easy A, which I recommend. That's a great movie.
Yep.
But it didn't explain Nancy Mace at all, the movie. So I'm hoping
disappointing
that the Scarlet Letter might have. I bet you've read it. So I'd like to play you Nancy Mace's explanation for why she was going around with a Scarlet Letter.
Okay.
And see if you can dip into your literature knowledge to explain to me what this has to do with the Scarlet Letter, the book.
I'm wearing the Scarlet Letter after the week that I just had last week, being a woman up here and being demonized for my vote and for my voice. I'm here to let the rest of the world know and the country know I'm on the side of the people. I'm not on the side of the establishment, and I'm going to do the right thing every single time, no matter the consequences, because I don't answer to anybody in D.C. I don't answer to anyone in Washington. I only answer to the people.
So, Dave, would you say that's consistent with your understanding of the Scarlet Letter?
No.
No? Do you have any explanation? No,
I don't. I think she actually should have carried a harpoon around and said, "I'm carrying this harpoon around because Washington is my Moby Dick.
Yep.
It's my white whale.
Yep.
I'm going to kill it."
Sure. I would
like that would have been a more that at least would have been true to the literary text if she was Captain Ahab.
And people would have been unlikely to disagree given she was carrying a harpoon at the time. You're right, she should have done that. But that was day one of the week. And then a couple of days later she said she couldn't support Steve Scalise because, quote, "I personally cannot in good conscience vote for someone who attended the white supremacist conference and compared himself to David Duke. I would be doing an enormous disservice to the voters I represent in South Carolina if I were to do that." Now, that white supremacist stuff seems a little unfair. I'll explain that in a second.
Yep.
That's the second thing I want to talk about. But regardless of how you feel about that story, the Scalise story, it broke years before Nancy Mace
very long time
specifically campaigned with him for her election with many, many photos. And she didn't seem to have a problem then. And then
Alvin!
It's also unlikely
Yep.
that is her motivation because the paragon of virtue she chose to back instead was Jim Jordan.
Yes.
And we'll be getting to his allegations in a second as well.
Yes, yeah.
Now, she tried to explain that choice of Jim Jordan to Jake Tapper.
Yes.
To Jake Tapper right here.
Who are some of the other possible individuals who you think maybe could get to 217?
Well, I think Jim Jordan is not out of the mix. I've talked to a lot of people who still support him. I've actually talked to Democrats who trust him at his word. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Jim Jordan?
Yes, I've talked to Democrats over the last week on who do they trust, even though they wouldn't agree with him on many issues. He is someone.
The Jim Jordan from Ohio?
Oh, yes, the Jim Jordan from Ohio.
Democrats in Congress?
Yes, they can work with him, and those that
Name
I've
one
talked to.
Democrat from Congress that trusts Jim Jordan.
Name people off the record.
You got to hand it to him. He's a good smart ass. Jake
Yes,
Tapper.
yeah.
He is. Anyway, so that was. He's almost Fetterman-esque, actually.
Yes.
It's mockery.
Yeah.
Now, I thought her weird flip-flopping that she's been doing recently was because her district lines were redrawn, so it went from being a toss-up seat to a safe red seat.
Right.
In fact, for those who don't know, her seat is currently in the Supreme Court right now
Yes.
for being gerrymandered.
Yes.
It's so heavily gerrymandered. So if the Supreme Court rules against the gerrymander, then she might flip back to how
Yes.
she used to be. But anyway, I think I might be wrong about her motivation because on January 31, 2020, this is what she had to say about Trump.
I want to be a new voice for the Republican Party, and that's one of the reasons I've spoken out so strongly against the president, against these QAnon conspiracy theorists that led us in a constitutional crisis. It's just wrong, and we got to put a stop to it.
That's January 2021, so not 2020, after January 6th, obviously. So that's how she began. But before long, she was recording videos outside Trump Tower.
Right.
And talking about how she was supporting him back in 2015. And she's now privately telling Republicans that she has a real shot at being named Trump's VP.
What?
According to, wait for it, 6 Republicans familiar with the discussions. Also, 3 South Carolina Republicans also said that they'd heard Mace floating herself as a VP pick, dating back a few months. So 9 people have gone on the record, albeit anonymously, because they found it so funny that she thinks she's going to be VP. That they
for a
leak
second, I thought you were saying like there are 6 people actually familiar with Trump's thinking.
No. She's obviously been telling a lot of people, and 9 people have just been found so amusing they've leaked it out.
Wow.
That she thinks she's going to be VP. So that is what's going on here. She's pulling publicity stunts and stuff.
Yeah.
To try and put herself out there to be potentially the VP. And like Trump has not forgotten that she introduced herself by attacking him.
Yes.
Like, so a source close to Trump said, quote, he absolutely hates Nancy Mace. So anyway, so I find that kind of weird that she's.
Yeah.
I thought she was at least intelligent. I thought she was weird but intelligent. But how could you possibly think that Trump is going to make you VP?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is consistent with intelligent but weird. Let's frame it as not weird but intelligent but weird.
Okay,
right.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Intelligent but weird. Yeah. Nancy Mace, so she was the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, which was this notoriously all-male military academy in North Carolina. That the first time a woman ever tried to go through it was just relentlessly bullied out of there. So to be the first woman to graduate from the Citadel,
she's got to be tough.
Like, she's got to be tough, and probably weird, right? To want to actually to want to do that in the first place. She volunteered for Ron Paul's campaign, in 2012. So. She's had a bit of a political odyssey.
She certainly has.
You might say. So all of this to me is consistent with intelligent but weird. Yeah. And one of the hallmarks of people who are intelligent but weird is that they can come up with all this reasoning for things that has a lot of consistent internal logic, but just leads you to completely bizarre outcomes. And I think a lot of Nancy Mace is that.
You know who this reminds me of, what you're describing? That Arizona Senate candidate. What was his name? The libertarian guy who...
Blake Masters.
Blake Masters.
Yes, yeah.
Blake Masters. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, that's a good explanation. I'm glad I brought her up. I wanted to talk about the Scalise Nazi thing. I did just flag that.
Yeah.
There's 2 allegations. One is that it was from a website, Sen Lamar, which reported in 2014 that Scalise had been an honoured guest at the 2002 International White Supremacist Convention put on by the European American Unity and Rights Organisation, Euro, in Louisiana. And 2, that he described himself to someone back in the day as like David Duke without the baggage, around the same period, maybe a bit before. Now, that website, Sen Lamar, is the only source suggesting that Scalise...
What is this website?
I've got no idea. It's called Sen Lamar, if you want to look it up. It's the only source suggesting that Scalise actually attended that white nationalist conference.
Right, yes.
There were no other sources,
yes.
Right? There was a recap of the event in David Duke's newsletter that didn't mention Scalise attending. Although Duke himself didn't go, but still, it listed a whole bunch of people, and Scalise wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
Right? In 2014, there was a Slate story which disputed that Scalise ever attended in response to that.
Wow. Okay.
It quoted Kenny Knight, who is a David Duke friend and a Scalise friendly acquaintance. So,
I love that his initials are KK.
Yes. I wonder what his middle name is.
Yeah.
And he said Scalise spoke early in the day to a contingent of people prior to the conference kicking off. He was not there as a guest speaker at the conference. David Duke was quoted about Scalise in the same piece. I didn't get the impression that he was one of us. I didn't cultivate a relationship. Kenny was the one who did. When asked about in 2014, this is what Scalise said. He said he was not aware that the group was affiliated with white supremacists they spoke to. I don't have any records from back in 2002, but when people called and asked me to speak to groups, I went and spoke to groups. I didn't know who all these groups were, and I detest any kind of hate group. For anyone to suggest that I was involved with a group like that is insulting and ludicrous. The guy who wrote the story, Mr. Sen Lamar, if you will, now says, I wrote the story about Scalise attending Euro conference. He isn't a white supremacist. I earnestly believe he was duped by Kenny Knight. KK. So, look, I mean, you can draw your own conclusions. I'm not, Nancy Mace sure has.
Yes,
I'm not sure I'd hang him based on evidence. As for the David Duke quote,
Yeah.
that was from an article in 2014 where one reporter was citing a memory from 20 years earlier.
Wow.
Which she had neither recorded nor reported before then.
Yes, yeah.
So once again, draw your own conclusions on that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's impossible to be true, but I don't think it's the best evidence allegation in history.
No.
So I'll just put that out there. But yeah, Nancy's made up her mind. We should talk about the wrestling stuff as well.
Yes.
We haven't gone into too much detail about it before, because it's hard to talk about Jim Jordan without talking about wrestling. Ohio State University, where he was a wrestling coach in the 80s and 90s. Independent report commissioned by the university concluded that team doctor Richard Strauss sexually abused at least 177 male student patients between 79 and 98. A lot of that time, Jim Jordan was there. He didn't do much. 6 former OSU wrestlers who told CNN that they were present when Jordan heard or responded to sexual misconduct complaints about Strauss. 8 others say that Strauss's inappropriate behaviour was such an open secret in the athletic department that there was no way Jordan couldn't have known about it.
Yes.
Dunyasha Yetz, who's a former OSU wrestler who has publicly and repeatedly accused Jordan of lying, said his hypocrisy is unbelievable. He doesn't deserve to be House Speaker. He still has to answer for what happened to us. And this is a bit which I find interesting. Jordan's spokesperson, Russell Dye, has said, quote, Chairman Jordan never saw or heard any abuse, and if he had, he would have dealt with it. But one victim said, my problem with Jimmy, and he called him Jimmy, is that he's been playing with words instead of supporting us. None of us used the word sexual abuse when we talked about what Doc Strauss was doing to us. We just knew it was weird, and Jimmy knew about it because we talked about it all the time in the locker room at practices everywhere. So then John McCormick from the National Review followed up.
Yes.
And he asked Russell Dye, the spokesperson, if he was playing with words.
Yes.
He asked him about the wrestler's claim that Jordan was playing word games. Did Jordan, as a coach, ever hear Ohio State wrestlers complain about examinations performed by the team doctor that made them uncomfortable? The spokesperson responded, Chairman Jordan never saw or heard of any abuse, and if he had, he would have dealt with it. Exactly the same words. John McCormick followed up. Did Jordan ever hear wrestlers complain about the frequency or duration of the team doctor's hernia checks? Even if the wrestlers themselves didn't describe it as sexual abuse. He said, Chairman Jordan never saw or heard of any abuse, and if he had, he would have dealt with it. Draw your own conclusions. So there you go.
And remember, this is somebody who, as an assistant wrestling coach, was notorious for just spending a lot of time in the locker room.
The king of the sauna.
Yeah, the king of the sauna.
Yes.
And I think also, wasn't he named as a co-defendant by 4 wrestlers on a lawsuit that didn't end up going anywhere?
I don't know.
That was related to Strauss. Strauss died by suicide in 2004. So, I mean, that's the end of that story. I always think it's such a sad contrast with, and I think I mentioned this before at some point on the podcast years ago, with Anthony Gonzalez, who was an Ohio State football player, a very, very good one, part of an extremely good Ohio State team in 2006 that I think they went to the national championship game, didn't win, but were, absolutely beloved throughout the state of Ohio. He was a really well-known figure, much-loved player. He went into Congress And he was one of the 10 who voted to impeach Trump. And, so he is no longer in Congress.
Yeah.
While the king of the sauna
It continues to
still
rule.
there. So
He abides.
yes, a tale of 2 inhabitants of the Ohio State University athletic department. And it's basically the saddest comment that you can make on the Republican Party, that you take these 2 people and who is the one who is now still running to be Speaker of the House? Yeah.
Should say, though, that he hasn't quite escaped his past because at least Stefanik made his nomination the other day when and she gave him a bit of a encouragement.
Yep.
And this is how the Democrats reacted when she got to you'll hear the bit I'm talking about.
Whether as Judiciary Chair, conservative leader, or representative for his constituents in West Central Ohio, whether on the wrestling mat or in the committee room, Jim Jordan is strategic, scrappy, tough, and principled.
Yeah. So he's not going to escape it.
No.
He's not.
No.
Anything else to say about speakers, Dave?
No.
Okay, let's get to the other story. Actually, let's have a quick toilet break. I'm not sure if you remember Afroman. Do you remember Afroman?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because I Got High?
Yes.
Back in 2001?
Yeah.
We wouldn't describe him as the world's greatest musician.
No.
No.
No, wouldn't describe him as the world's greatest anything.
Maybe the world's greatest dope smoker. but anyway, Adams County Sheriff's Office, that's in Colorado.
Yes, yeah.
They executed a search warrant on Afroman's house last August.
What's his actual name?
I don't know what his name is.
Yeah, okay.
I choose to believe his name is Afroman.
Right.
The search warrant was on suspicion of drug possession. Well, they probably had evidence for that. Drug trafficking and kidnapping.
Oh.
Some informant had told them that Afroman had a basement dungeon. They couldn't find that basement dungeon. They didn't find much really at all. What they did find was his home surveillance system that recorded their search. They found that. And an Afroman said, I'll quote him from an article now.
Yeah.
I asked myself, as a powerless black man in America, what can I do to the cops that kicked my door in, tried to kill me in front of my kids, stole my money and disconnected my cameras? The only thing I could come up with was make a funny rap song about them and make some money. Use the money to pay for the damages they did and move on.
Okay.
So he made film clips out of their surveillance footage. So they weren't happy. So they sued Afroman.
Oh, no.
For using their personas for commercial purposes without permission, causing them to suffer, quote, embarrassment, ridicule, emotional distress, humiliation, and loss of reputation.
No.
They said it's been more difficult and dangerous to carry out their duties because of comments made and attitudes expressed towards them by members of the public who have seen the videos. Afroman said his immediate reaction to the lawsuit was, quote, a drop of anger, disbelief, and a little anxiety, followed by tons of laughter. This week, the judge dismissed most of their claims, not all of their claims, before the case even began.
Yep.
He's allowed a few counts to proceed to the next stage.
Yep.
Mostly defamation because of some statements that Afroman made online outside the music videos.
Yes.
Like he said the deputies when they killed them, he said that one of them stole money from him. He said that another deputy was a lesbian. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, we'll see where that goes. In the meantime, though, your toilet break is I want you to enjoy some excerpts from one of his songs, Will You Help Me Repair My Door? And if you watch the video, you'll see that it's all surveillance footage. I do warn you, Afroman is not very good at music.
Will you help me repair my gate? Will you help me repair my door? Did you find what you was looking for? Will you help me repair my gate and door? Would you like a slice of lemon pound cake? You can take as much as you wanna take. There must be a big mistake. Would you like to have a slice of my lemon pound cake? Let me ask you something, officer. Any kidnapping victims inside my seat pockets? Are there any kidnapping victims inside my suit pockets? You crooked cops need to stop it. There are no kidnapping victims in my suit pockets. Let me ask you something else. Any kidnapping victims inside my CDs? Any kidnapping victims inside my CDs? The Adams County Sheriff Department, you can get these. There are no kidnapping victims in my CDs.
I just played you guys a lot more than I played Dave. I thought he could only tolerate so much. But that little taste you just had there, Dave, was that whet your appetite?
Well, Afroman's got a lot of CDs.
He really does. He really, really does. Anyway, that's your toilet break. Let's go to Israel. There's a question from a viewer.
Yep.
Dave, can anyone explain why Hezbollah... sorry, it's from David. Can anyone explain why Hezbollah are proclaimed as a terrorist group? After all, they're actually part of Lebanon's government.
The two things are not mutually exclusive. So remembering that the designation of a terrorist group is something that gets applied to an organisation by a government or by other governments. So the US designates a lot of organisations as terrorist groups, even though a lot of them, they may well be involved in terrorist activity, but they may also be involved in mainstream political activity. And there's often a lot of controversy about these organisations that have both an armed wing and a political wing. So a good example of this is in Northern Ireland, the IRA was a terrorist group. You know, IRA members could not be heard on British media. It was illegal to broadcast their voices. But there was a political party associated with the IRA called Sinn Féin. Now, the extent to which IRA and Sinn Féin are intertwined has always been extremely controversial. Okay, so Gerry Adams, who is the leader of Sinn Féin, has always denied that he is part of the IRA, although there was the book Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, which was about an unsolved murder in Northern Ireland in the 70s, pretty explicitly says that according to his information, Gerry Adams was not only part of the IRA, but he was actually ordering murders. So, but in any case, the point is, IRA is designated as a terrorist organisation. Sinn Féin was winning seats in Westminster. Wouldn't take up those seats as a matter of principle, but they were winning seats in Westminster. In Northern Ireland elections, Sinn Féin is periodic, is always one of the parties that gets the most votes. So it is entirely possible for an organisation both to be designated as a terrorist organisation and also to be involved in democratic politics. Hamas, I believe, designated as a terrorist organisation by the US. They effectively were the government in Gaza because of the 2006 election. They
not recognised.
Not recognised as the government, but they functionally, they functionally were the government. So, Hezbollah officially part of Lebanon's government, but that doesn't stop them from being designated as a terrorist organisation by the United States.
The thing I like best about that answer,
yes,
apart from the usual thoroughness, is that you incorporated a little bit of Planet Britain in there.
Yes, I did.
So
yes, a preview for Planet Britain.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Yes.
We're not going to get that to that
coming to your very small screen in 50 years' time.
Okay, so now we've got that out of the way.
Yep.
What aspects are there any aspects of this week with Israel that you want to start talking about?
No, not really. I just want to note that while I was coming into the building today, Joe Biden was making a speech.
Yes.
So I don't know very much about that, other than that he is explicitly linking the Israeli and Ukrainian causes together.
Yes.
So he is asking for $100 billion in aid to Ukraine and Israel, linking them together as struggles for democracy. That will be music to Vladimir Zelensky's ears because he decided from day one that this was going to be his strategy for, at a time when US support for Ukraine is weakening, that he's going to tie it to the Israel issue. So that's playing out very well for him. It will be interesting to see how it plays out domestically. But obviously, the House of Representatives can't really respond to this request at the moment. Yeah, but we'll see.
There is a connection. In fact, I'll give it to you right now because I got a few areas I want to talk about.
Okay.
The first area I want to talk about is Hamas's strategy.
Yeah.
Because you don't hear much from Hamas in our media.
No.
I'm sure in the Middle East you probably hear a little bit more. But in our media you don't. But an interview surfaced this week, which I thought I'd share with you guys, involving the senior Hamas official,
Yes.
Ali Baraka.
Yep.
And look, we're going to get to disinformation.
Yep.
I don't know if these translations are accurate.
Okay, yeah.
But these are the translations that are on the clip.
Okay.
So,
Where did the clip come from?
it was one of those right-wing groups.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know which one.
All right.
Yeah.
You've been warned.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, this is
That's
not
what it is.
It's not particularly inflammatory. Or
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I just want to flag.
Yes.
There's so much we don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So I'm just going to read out some quotes for you. In the past couple of years, this is a quote from Ali Baraka. In the past couple of years, Hamas has adopted a rational approach, in inverted commas. It did not go into any war and did not join the Islamic Jihad in its recent battle. Interviewer says, but this was all part of Hamas's strategy in preparing for an attack. Of course, we made them think that Hamas was busy governing Gaza and that it wanted to focus on the 2.5 million Palestinians and had abandoned the resistance altogether. All the while, under the table, Hamas was preparing for this big attack. So that's just, if that's true, that's confirming that they played Nyet-anyahu in the way that we speculated before. He also suggests the next bit goes to whether Iran were involved in the planning or not. Quote, in order to keep the attack secret and successful, the different factions and our allies did not know the 0 hour. But after half an hour, all the Palestinian resistance factions were contacted, as were our allies in Hezbollah and Iran. The Turks were also notified, and a meeting was held with them 3 hours later at 9 a.m. Even the Russians sent a message and inquired, and they were updated about the situation and about the goals of the war. So if you believe that, then Iran at least wasn't so involved that they knew when it was happening, at the very least. He confirms the Republican logic about the $6 billion, but not about the $6 billion, about the bit that they were all cool with, which was the prisoner swaps.
Yes.
He says, there are also prisoners in the US. We want them. Of course. There are Hamas members sentenced for life in the US. We want them too. Of course. We demand that the US free our sons from prisons. The US conducts prisoner swaps. Only recently it did one with Iran. Why wouldn't it conduct a prisoner swap with us? After all, it's participating in the war. Biden, the highest authority in the US, declared that he stands with Israel against Hamas and the Palestinian people. Therefore, he's a partner to this aggression. He must pay a price. So he's talking about hostages here. He's saying, the logic that he's with the $6 billion about how if you give them $6 billion, they're going to, next time it'll be $10 billion.
Yeah.
He wants to do that with hostages. We're just going to keep on taking hostages until you release all our prisoners. Right? So they might not enjoy that logic, but that's what he says. And this is why I bring this up. He confirms the Russian relationship. And there's a tie between Ukraine and the Israel war.
Right,
here.
okay, yeah.
Quote, there are countries that support us politically. Even Russia sympathizes with us. Even the Russians sent us messages yesterday morning. They sympathize with us. Russia is happy America is getting embroiled in Palestine. It alleviates the pressure of Russia in Ukraine. One war eases pressure in another war. So we're not alone on the battlefield. So he's specifically tying the two wars together, which is quite interesting. Yeah, so anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay, so to the extent that we can trust that. Yeah, okay.
That's what they say. And to be honest, I see no reason to trust it because none of that was particularly, like he's not going, I'm a vampire, I enjoy beheading children.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't doing anything like that.
And there's a definite strategic logic visible that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the first thing about Hamas. And then the next thing about Hamas, which I thought was interesting, was early last week, there were some documents discovered on the bodies of dead Hamas terrorists. And they were leaked to the public. They showed detailed plans to target, quote, elementary schools and a youth centre and to kill as many people as possible. The documents ordered the soldiers to take hostages and return back to Gaza. They were very, very specific documents. They had specifically identified targets where they could expect lots of women and children.
Yeah.
They had been scoped out. The buildings were circled. They highlighted on the map. They had entry points identified. So it's very difficult to write off, if these are true, it's very difficult to write off their actions as freelancers.
Oh, God, no.
Like they were very, very specific. No. Also, it turns out they've been training for 2 years right next to the borders.
Yes.
Hamas released some of their training footage to rub it in.
Yeah.
And they were basically replicating the gates of Gaza, etc.
Yeah.
So this was really, really, really well planned.
Yeah.
So just throw that out there. A random note about Hamas, by the way. We've heard a lot about Iran helping out Hamas. This is just by the by. I just saw an article which happened to mention that Hamas receives between $360 million and $480 million in aid annually from Qatar. They get $100 million from Iran.
Yeah.
All right. Now, it's not direct terror funding.
No.
But a third of that money apparently is used to purchase fuel from Egypt and then
yes,
and then ship to Gaza and then they resell it to then use that for whatever they like.
Yes, yeah.
The other 2/3 is split between funding Gaza civilians and the paychecks of Hamas civil workers. But as we keep hearing from Republicans, money is fungible.
Yes.
So while they're paying that money can be Qatar are funding Gaza and Hamas way more than Iran.
Yes, yeah.
We never hear about that. We never hear about let's go and invade Qatar.
No.
Even though Hamas are there.
Yes.
That's where they're located, the leaders of Hamas. So why is that? I mean, the cynic in me suggests that maybe Qatar is more useful to the West than Iran is. But I think it's just worth noting because there ain't much Qatar talk out there.
No.
So just throw that out there.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about this area before I move on?
No.
No? Okay. All right. I'll talk about Gaza a bit, the meat grinder that's going on there at the moment.
Yeah.
I spoke last week about Yoav Gallant, their defense minister,
Yes.
Israel. I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There'll be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we are acting accordingly. Egypt confirmed this week that Israel was not letting them send in any aid to South Gaza, which is where all the people are.
Yep.
We've since heard that Blinken and Biden have been working on them, and Blinken and Biden both say that they are about to.
I saw this.
Release some aid in.
Yep.
They negotiate a way for it to happen. They've been saying this for days. I haven't heard it going in yet.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. But, that would be nice. The most bloodthirsty person out there, by the way, ain't Yoav Gallant.
Yeah.
And there are some really choice quotes out there. But the most bloodthirsty person is Tom Cotton. Which I don't know if you saw this quote.
But you know the images that we're going to get. They're going to say this is Israel. They are carpet bombing and blanketing the Gaza Strip in a way that leaves, first of all, food and water cut off, a humanitarian crisis and destruction there.
Shannon, as far as I'm concerned, Israel can bounce the rubble in Gaza. Anything that happens in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas.
Anyway, it goes on. That's our mate. That's a friend of the podcast. Hi, Tom. I know you're a pepper as well.
You're never going to be president, by the way.
Yes, I think he realizes that now. But anyway, like I said, Blinken and Biden appear to be working on that. Although the other thing, they turned the water back on, but they don't have power or fuel, which means that they can't treat the water, which means you can't drink it.
Yeah.
And a 2017 Amnesty International report found 90 to 95% of the potable water supply in Gaza was contaminated and unfit for human consumption.
Yeah.
So that's not going to help much. And, look, we should just note, to be fair here, that Hamas interfere with aid a lot as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, It's been an ongoing issue. The former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, said recently that Israel have for a very long time been sending 1,200 truckloads of humanitarian assistance to the border with Gaza, and they only ever accept 400 trucks. For those wondering, though, why America isn't leaning on Israel harder when they've basically got the place under siege, still haven't let in any aid, turn off water, etc. Biden does talk about it a bit. There's a quote from his speech the other day. We also discussed how democracies like Israel and the United States are stronger and more secure when we act according to the rule of law. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
But there was a strategy here, which I want to read out to you, a very long quote, not very long, a longish quote from Franklin Faux, who I like to always refer to as the Biden whisperer.
Yes. Yep.
He's the guy that Biden talks to, clearly.
Yes.
So I think it's worth quoting him for getting Biden's frame of mind.
Yes.
Is what Franklin Faux wrote. In May 2021, Hamas began firing rockets on Israeli citizens. Israeli cities. Biden told aides that he wanted to scrap the traditional playbook for navigating such a conflagration. Rather than dispatching his Secretary of State to the region or calling for a ceasefire, he said he wanted to smother Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with friendship. Or as one White House aide described it to me, Biden wanted to hug Bibi tight. This was a strategy built on an understanding of Israeli anxiety. The nation, historically encircled by enemies, desperately craves the affirmation of American friendship at its moments of peril. It needs to feel loved and secure when it fears for its existence. Instead of hectoring Israel, Biden wanted to bank emotional capital. He wanted Netanyahu to understand his own belief in Israel's right to self-defense, and he wanted to show the Israeli public his steadfastness. Then, over the course of the conflict, he planned on drawing down the trust he had deposited by guiding Netanyahu to the most prudent course of action. Instead of lecturing Netanyahu, Biden conducted the calls in the spirit of a Socratic dialogue. He would ask questions that forced Netanyahu to articulate his goals. How will this end? How will you know when you've restored deterrence? That's the quote. Now, Biden apparently reckons it's working. He said in 2014, Israel's war with Hamas extended 50 days. In 2021, it lasted 11 when he dispensed the hug Bibi strategy. And apparently this course of action is in counterpoint to what Obama did, which according to Biden didn't work at all and completely backfired.
Yeah.
So what are your views about that?
I don't think anything works with Netanyahu.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, that explains why Biden's there at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, Franklin Faux is very good at explaining Biden's logic, but I just don't think it's ever going to work.
So would you do the same thing if you were Biden, or what do you think you should? Or do you think it just doesn't?
I mean,
matter?
he literally did go and hug, publicly hugged Netanyahu now, at a time when nobody in Israel wants to hug Netanyahu.
Yeah, his polling is terrible.
Yes.
Actually, you keep talking. I'll find the polling. I saw it recently.
Yeah. Like, for reasons that we talked about last week, Netanyahu is widely believed as being very culpable in this, regardless of what people's political views are, regardless of whether they're generally hawkish or generally dovish. Netanyahu's strategy has led to disaster. Now, last week I talked about one element of this strategy was the idea that you could separately make peace with all of these countries in the Arab world while ignoring the Palestinian issue. But the even worse strategic failure, which Chaz also talked about last week, was the idea of seeing Hamas as basically a useful force, that was going to keep Gaza and the West Bank separated. What Netanyahu was really interested in was, making sure that nothing happened on the West Bank, totally limiting the assertiveness of the West Bank, limiting any possibility of a Palestinian state. He could do that while Hamas was operating in Gaza. There are well-documented quotes from current members of his coalition government talking about the Palestinian Authority being a burden, but Hamas being an asset, basically openly talking about this as the plan. And now we have seen where the plan has led.
Yep. Now, the polling I've got here is from the Jerusalem Post. It's only 620, but, it's a hard time to poll.
Yes, yeah.
Out of 620 Israeli Jews polled, 86% felt that the surprise attack from Gaza was the fault of Israel's government.
Yeah.
79% of coalition supporters agreed.
Yes.
That's the Netanyahu's team.
Yeah.
Right? Nearly all of the respondents, a whopping 94%, said the government was responsible for the lack of security that led to the infiltration of Israel's south.
Yep.
Times of Israel poll, 48% want Gantz to lead the country compared to 29% for Netanyahu. Favorability ratings, Netanyahu gets 42%. Even amongst Likud voters,
wow,
he gets 67%.
Yeah.
So that's where he's at.
So there is not a rally round the flag effect happening for Netanyahu. There is a rally round the flag effect happening for the Israeli military, but not for Netanyahu. And that's not even talking about other political failures that have led to this, because the backdrop to all of this is that Israel has had to have, 4 elections in the last 5 years.
Yep.
that it's become increasingly obvious that Netanyahu's major political aim is staying out of jail, is staying out of court. That's why he needs to keep being prime minister. That's why he's going into coalition with increasingly extreme people who in the past he never would have gone into coalition with. That's why he keeps losing right-wing allies from his own party, because he's going into coalition with people who are so extreme that they believe it's a path that's inevitably going to lead to violence, as well as with religious groups whose, basically whole political program is to force the secular parts of Israel to be to be religious and to get themselves exempted from military service. And that brings us to the military service issue, which is because Netanyahu has turned the government basically into a vehicle of trying to get out of his own corruption trial. He's been implementing, legal reforms that would severely limit the ability of the Supreme Court to enact judicial review of the Israeli government. That's so unpopular that reservists were demonstrating against it, and a lot of people hold this responsible for the weakened state of the Israeli military at the moment. So even the Hawks are not very fond of Netanyahu.
Not to mention, I know you touched on this before, but not to mention that so much of the military is looking after the settlers while they are being aggressive.
Yes.
Against Palestinians on the West Bank.
Yes, yeah.
Like 51 Palestinians have been shot in the week after.
Yes, yeah.
On the West Bank, the
Yeah.
week after the attacks on the West Bank. Like it's just going like there's just Netanyahu's government is so biased towards the settlers.
Yes,
and
yeah.
anyone who cares about even the possibility of reconciliation,
Yes.
which is pretty much everyone except for his coalition.
Yes, yeah.
That's was just looking at that, just going, this isn't helping.
Yeah.
This is not helping, and the military are all over there trying to protect these people.
Yeah.
It's really not good. I was going to say that Netanyahu is also he's so unpopular. He's bunkered down. He's not even Blinken and Biden have both met survivors from the Hamas attacks, but Netanyahu hasn't. Yeah, God. He's just bunkered down, and unlike in America, in Israel, it's an absolute tradition. Whenever there's a terrorist attack, the first thing they do is go to the hospitals, talk to survivors, and he's been avoiding them because he knows he's going to get yelled at. There's so much footage of coalition politicians being screamed at in hospitals when they go to visit these guys, because the other ones are. Netanyahu's not.
Yeah.
He's just hiding. It's he's in the bunker, Talk about the bunker. When we talk about what we should discuss briefly about what they're trying to do in Gaza.
Yeah.
Because what Netanyahu's tactics are, because it appears to be entirely about these tunnels. Like Hamas has got 500 kilometers. They say they've got 500 kilometers worth of tunnels. Who knows? They're hardcore reinforced tunnels, by the way. You can't blow them up. I'll show you some footage there. Dave doesn't need to see. There we go. Note, by the way, they don't use any of those tunnels to shelter their population.
No.
No, just to shelter themselves and to shelter their weapons, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, as a little aside, actually, I'll bring up a clip. I saw an interview with a Western nurse there in Gaza who talked through what the Gaza people deal with explosions. It was really quite interesting, I thought.
Whenever you go to Gaza, you always know that there's danger of some violence while you're there. But no, I wasn't prepared for this.
Let us know if you need to go into some sort of a bomb shelter or whatever, because I can hear those explosions going off right near you.
There are no bomb shelters here.
Is there any safe area that you can go to?
Yeah, actually I have a sister-in-law who's Palestinian. She tells me to stay away from the windows, so I'm away from the window, stay by corners of walls that are more fortified, and open your mouth so your eardrums don't break if there's a lot of pressure. So I'm following her advice, and I'm in a safe part of the room.
There you go. Just stay near the corners and keep your mouth open. And by the way, I know this is not the worst part of right now, but it's right up there. How are we heading into another war where Wolf Blitzer is the chief of CNN covering it? How have we gotten to this point? What has the world done to deserve this? I ask you. Anyway. Okay, but they're going after these tunnels, right? And so they've blown up a whole bunch of areas above ground. They're going to go into these tunnels and try and like Netanyahu's clearly said every Hamas operative will die. Hamas is ISIS. We'll crush them and get rid of them. Just as the world crushed and got rid of ISIS, you need to go to the tunnels to do that, right? But of course, if they do that, they're giving up on the hostages.
Yes.
There's 199 hostages who will clearly die if that happens. Which is interesting because normally in the past, Israel's been so worried about hostages.
Yes.
And there's another group of people who hate Netanyahu.
Yeah.
The hostages' families going,
Yes.
what the hell are you doing?
Yes, yeah.
All right. But Israel's explicitly said that they are not going to, they said they will not take hostages into consideration for how they prosecute the war against Hamas, absent specific information about exactly where the captives are held. So they're just leaving them to die, which is amazing to me. By the way, Iran, I wouldn't trust them, but Iran claim that Hamas is ready to release the hostages if Israel ceases its airstrikes along the Gaza Strip, for what it's worth. I haven't heard anyone else. I heard that once.
Sorry, Iran said that?
Iran said that.
Yeah, don't know that Iran's
I'm not sure I trust them. I'm not sure
on this. Yeah.
I'm not sure we trust them. But just throw it out there.
Yes.
But I find it amazing that we're not talking about hostages at all. It's weird. Do you have anything to say about Gaza?
Well, just on that hostages point, I mean, I don't know how relevant this is.
It'll be a problem for Biden as well because the Americans will die as well.
I'm reminded of the documentary about the Munich 1972.
Yeah.
Taking of Israeli hostages by Black September. And Golda Meir, who was the Prime Minister of Israel, her response was that she wouldn't negotiate over hostages because if she negotiated over hostages, she said then no Jew anywhere in the world would be safe. And like that's often the response that governments have. So I don't know but that doesn't seem to have been the logic in Israel more recently.
No.
Like in Israel there have been, hundreds of Hamas prisoners released in exchange for like a single hostage.
Over 1,000 for one hostage.
Yes, yeah. So that has not been the logic. That hasn't been the logic recently, but I certainly what they are doing in Gaza now is completely incompatible with saving the lives of hostages. Yeah,
but for me, it's. I mean, I get not doing prisoner swaps.
Yeah,
but not even trying to recover them. Anyway, we got 10 minutes, so I want to I'll just take one more topic from this from this area, which is because this is the one that's going to age the most, the quickest, which is disinformation.
Yes,
there are two obviously golden areas of people not knowing what the hell was going on this week. First was beheadings.
Yes,
right. The supposedly 40 beheaded babies in the kibbutz. Right. Now, that claim originally came from an Israeli journo embedded with the military. She passed on the info without saying she'd seen them herself. She said she'd heard that. An IDF spokesperson said the children were killed, but that reports of beheadings were unconfirmed. People then online started to get suspicious.
Yes.
Right? Sky chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey, who was there at the kibbutz, said, quote, "At no point did either he or the other major I spoke to ever mention that Hamas had beheaded or killed 40 babies or children. I believe that if it were the case, they would have told me and others there. There is no doubt the horrific attack took place at Kfar Azar and it needed to be reported, and we did see the bodies of the dead from the community in their houses, in the back of a truck and on the basketball court, but it's important to separate the facts from speculation in a situation like this. To reiterate, the IDF had every opportunity to inform the world's media of any story that had become apparent as the military continued to clear up the kibbutz. The murder and beheading of 40 children was never mentioned to me or my team." Oren Ziv, who works for an independent news outlet, was also there and said, "During the tour, we didn't see any evidence of this, and the Army spokesperson or commanders also didn't mention any such incidents." Another IDF spokesperson, Major Dinner, said that babies' bodies had been found at the Kfar Azar and that some had been decapitated. The next day, he was approached and asked if he could provide details on the numbers and the manner of their death. He said, quote, "We're not going to investigate the condition of bodies, and even if we did, we won't comment publicly about the condition of our civilians' bodies and babies." He said the claims were based on what soldiers on the ground had relayed to him. Netanyahu's spokesperson, Tal Heinrich, said, "Toddlers, babies, I can tell you some of them, yes, heads were cut off. This is what we're hearing from soldiers on the ground who dealt with the bodies." She later clarified, "Please note, we said these reports are based on testimonies of soldiers." An Israeli official told CNN there have been cases of Hamas militants carrying out beheadings and other ISIS-style atrocities. However, we cannot confirm if the victims were men or women, soldiers or civilians, adults or children. The only person I can find who's independent, who said they saw something like that, was Yossi Landau, the head of operations from the southern region of Zakar, which is from Israel's volunteer civilian emergency response organization, said he saw with his own eyes children and babies who had been beheaded. That's one person. Netanyahu then showed Blinken and the world some photos of burnt babies, one of whom may have been beheaded. I'll show you that pic now. If you don't want to watch, turn away. That's the pic. There was some suggestion that could have been AI because it triggered off some AI detector.
Right.
Those aren't reliable. The Israeli government insists it's real, but no one confirmed that photo was from the original kibbutz anyway. Like, it could be from anywhere.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, bottom line doesn't actually matter whether the babies were beheaded in that attack or not. I can believe that some people were beheaded somewhere. Some people were burnt horribly. There are plenty of atrocities, obviously. The reason I bring this up is part one of this, is that it's an indication that info is becoming harder and harder to verify when you don't trust anybody.
Yes.
It's because I just listed a whole bunch of officials.
Yes.
Who, if this was 10 years ago, you go, well, each of those officials are confirmation.
Yes, yeah.
And every single one, people just said, well, I don't trust them. Well, I don't trust this person. Well, I don't trust that person.
Yeah.
And where are we at with this? Are we in trouble here? Because if people aren't trusting, I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not arguing, the Israelis, they're really trustworthy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we're at a point now where people are just not trusting official statements.
Yeah.
And so then you need proof online, which is hard to provide. Because, you provide the photo and they go, well, is that from there?
Yeah.
Could be from somewhere else. Like, you need to see it on location now.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about this?
Don't really have any.
Okay. All right. Well, let me go to part two, which is it's an interesting one as well. It's a slightly different element of this, which is the hospital.
Yes.
The New York Times ran the story, Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospitals, Palestinians say. Before long, that became at least 500 dead in strike on Gaza hospital, Palestinians say. And then that became at least 500 dead in blast at Gaza hospital, Palestinians say. The Gaza Ministry of Health held a press conference supposedly on the site with dead bodies strewn all around them. This was immediately sus because the 500 body count seemed to occur immediately. And it was pretty quick.
Yeah, I saw Israel was very skeptical about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
The next day, it was clear that the blast hit the car park next to the hospital, not the hospital.
Yes.
It's very unlikely that the 500 dead because the radius seemed to be only a few meters. Right? I'll show you the video of the site there. You can see it for yourself. It didn't hurt the hospital. You can see the hospital there. It's the white building. So it turns out they were lying because they knew it didn't hit the hospital. Okay. Also, this is the tiny crater that was left. I'll show you the crater. That's not an airstrike. So they knew it wasn't an airstrike, right? And common sense tells you that. Also, a number of independent military experts have since said, definitely. Okay. Twitter was awash with supposed info. There were countless photos and videos of the supposed location and the missiles that turned out to be wrong. The New York Times ran one of those fake photos. Israeli spokesperson tweeted that Israel did it, and then they deleted their tweet. The Israeli War Room, 1 minute, they tweeted out that 1 minute before the Baptist hospital in Gaza was hit, Hamas announced on its own Telegram channel they were launching their strongest rockets at the northern Israeli city of Haifa. However, no interceptions or impacts were detected near Haifa. Is that true? I don't know. No one knows.
Yes.
The IDF released an intercepted conversation of Hamas fighters supposedly talking about the explosion and saying it was Islamic Jihad. Was that real? No one seems to believe it. The IDF said they weren't firing the air. Is that true? We don't know. They said there was radar confirming a rocket barrage fired by a Palestinian militant group. They didn't provide it. Online, there were amateur geolocators who insisted they could provide it wasn't Israelis. I didn't understand the threat at all. It made no sense to me. The American intelligence said satellite and other infrared data proved that Israel were telling the truth. They didn't release it. Now, I'm sure that the Palestinians, in this case, were lying because the crater was really obvious. When you see it the next day, you go, well, that's clearly not an airstrike. It's clearly not in a hospital. It's clearly in a car park, right?
Yeah.
But we got to once again, we just got this point where it's just not clear what's reliable evidence, what isn't. And meanwhile, Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar days later were still claiming that it was an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
I find this really, really concerning, and I'll tell you why, because when no one trusts anything, there's repercussions. Like, for instance, one Likud member of parliament complained in response to IDF warnings about security threats to Israel in response to settler violence before the Hamas attack. Quote, the ideology of the left has reached the top echelons of the Shin Bet. The deep state has infiltrated the leadership of the Shin Bet and the IDF. Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
That's where we're at.
Yes.
You have any thoughts?
No, this is just all too depressing to contemplate.
Okay. All right. Look, we got someone banging on the door. So we'll get out of here. Dr. Dave, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Come on in. It's all right. Sorry. Stay peppy. See you later.